and welcome back to another Positive Images Festival poetry workshop. So I'm here for the February edition. Usually these would be held in Coventry in the library, but COVID, and so we're virtual. You may well hear guinea pigs in the background at some point, and I can definitely promise you poetry activities. So coming up, we have got a best practice quote from a well-known poet, plus discover a language poet and a little bit about what that means, and there's some more fun writing challenges. I hope they're fun. So let's go straight in. I've got a poem by a writer called Ray De Palma. He was born in 1943. And he published over 30 books of poetry, translations and graphic work with small presses. I am reading this from my notes because I'm not that good to remember it all. Often associated with the language poet, De Palma was the co-author of Legend in 1980. Language poetry is an avant-garde form of poetry. It's a movement that emerged in sort of the 1960s, the late 1960s, early 1970s. As a response to the more mainstream, largely American poetry of the time. Language poetry tends to pull the reader's attention with the use of the language in the poem. There's very much a focus on the importance of the language used and how that contributes to the meaning of the poem and how meaning is created, and it's very much up to the reader to decipher what that meaning is. So that's a bit about very, very brief introduction to the language poetry of the sort of late 60s, early 70s. This particular one, which I really love, I always love the poems that I use in these sessions. It's okay if you don't, because the chances of you liking all of the ones I like are small, but I hope you can appreciate them, even if you don't like them. This is called Across the Desert to LA by Ray De Palma. So I'll read that for you now, and I'll have the words on the screen too. Okay. Earlier, when the ink was thinner, I was ruining my eyes in bad light as a favour to you, in a belief that the best opportunities are extracted from the dark. I was given new maps every day to prevent news of my arrival from reaching any further than the next hill. I always knew you'd be there, waiting with the door half open and all the lights on upstairs, languishing with some bad news at the end of a few well-connected thoughts, when a more comprehensive perspective was what was needed. So I turned and faced the man on the hill, who was sketching the battle from memory. Assumption and conviction had come to mean the same thing for both of us. He thought he should put something down on paper, here, near the top of the page, lest you think his work was of some personal interest to anyone. Okay, so it's a bit of a strange one, but at first, go back, have a reread. You can Google it. All the poems that I use in these sessions are freely available online, which is why I'm able to use them. So at first the images and the sort of, the short snippets of stories can feel a bit disjointed in that one. There's the person waiting upstairs, and there's the guy on the hill, and then there's him giving a map, and it's all a bit like, what's going on here? However, the more you read it, the more you realise that there are overarching themes in this poem, and that by placing those sort of potentially unconnected and disjointed ideas and images next to each other, the poet is telling us something important. What that is up to you as the reader to decide. So that's the key thing. I'm not going to tell you what I think here. This is one for you to have a read over and have a think about. So here's a little challenge for you. Your challenge is to choose a topic or a word, anything you like. If there's stuck, here's a few suggestions. These are quite random. So blue, cats, grandparents, flowers, or anything else that you like. So first, don't write the poem. Split your page into 4 sections. You can do it in different 4 sections, but that was how I would do it. And in each section, write a memory or a short fictional description linked to that topic. So, for example, in the poem we just read, the poet might have written, if he was doing the activity, a memory about the man he met on a hill who was drawing an imagined battle scene. So that could be one of those memories related to the topic that you have chosen. When you've done that, and you've got 4 memories or descriptions, they can be completely fictional, they don't have to be true, but they're all related to that one overarching topic that you're choosing. Then see if you can craft them into a poem. Because as a poet, by putting them next to each other on the page, you're creating a connection and you're telling the reader something. And what that something is that they take away, well, that's up to them. That's not for you to decide. So have fun. It's a challenging one that I've kicked off with today, but I hope you enjoy it, and I will see you in the next part. Hopefully you'll come back. Hello, welcome back to the second part of the workshop. You'll notice I have got one of the noisy friends with me. So this is Alfie. Do you want to say hello? Or you just think there might be food in it for you? That's it. Alfie is basically like 100 in guinea pig years. He's my oldest, and he's daddy to all the other ones that you can hear being noisy, aren't you? Okay. There's a half a purpose. To be honest, any excuse to get one of the guinea pigs out. Go on then. Let them have a room around the floor, because why not? So next I want to think about who and what we share our space with. So you can hear some of the things and alive things that I share my space with. And there's a little challenge that goes along with this. So let me explain the challenge to you first, then I've got a beautiful poem as an example. So if you're able to, this poem is best done whilst walking or moving outside. However, it can also be done sitting down from your house and looking out of the window, especially if you're shielding or you're not able to get outside. Take a notepad and pen, and either go on a sort of 10 to 15 minute walk or sit by that window for 10 to 15 minutes. Stop to make notes. Please don't be writing across the road. That's not my fault. I'm taking no responsibility if you choose to do that. So carefully take your notebook and pen and just make a note of the things that are going on around you. So can you turn something familiar, like the view from your chair or your usual walk around the block, into something that can be celebrated? This is an extract, because the poem's hugely long, go and look it up, from Alexander Smith, and it's called Glasgow. It's the first 2 stanzas. I can't tell you how many more there are, potentially 20. It's a long one, but worth it. Sing, poet, 'tis a merry world, that a cottage smoke is rolled and curled, in sport that every moss is happy, every inch of soil. Before me runs a road of toil, with my grave cut across. Sing, trailing showers and breezy downs, I know the tragic hearts of towns. City, I am true son of thine, never dwelt I where great mornings shine round the bleating pens, never by the rivulets I strayed, and never upon my childhood weighed the silence of the glens. Instead of shores where oceans beat, I hear the ebb and flow of streets. And so it continues. So that was the space that he was occupying, Glasgow. Alexander Smith, I keep going to insert a middle name in there because one of my favourite authors has a very, very similar name. Alexander Smith, 1829, 1930-ish. They think he was born on the 31st of December 1829, but you know how records were those days, they can't specifically definitely say that is the case. He died on the 5th of January 1867, that one they are sure about. He was a Scottish poet, as you might have guessed from the topic, labelled as one of the spasmodic school. There we go, you can tick that off your bingo card. Stumbling over another word. Right. He was labelled as one of the spasmodic school and an essayist. Sorry, when the guinea pigs just sneezed, bless you. Spasmodic poetry was extremely popular from the late 1840s through to the 1850s, when it completely and abruptly fell out of fashion, and sadly, who knows, there might be a revival, but it is yet to return as a form. Spasmodic poetry frequently took the form of verse drama, and the protagonist would usually be the poet themselves, so they would be the narrator and the central character in the poem. It was characterised by a number of features, and these included often lengthy introspective soliloquies by said protagonist. So it's not to everyone's taste, but like, I love Glasgow. I think it's beautiful, like both the place and the poem. And so your challenge is to consider what space you occupy, what shares that space with you, and to just make it into something amazing and wonderful, celebrating the everyday and the ordinary. So maybe you might, on your walk in the notepad, you might note down snippets of conversations that you hear if you pass other people, although not from closer than 2 metres. Note the colours, note the smells, note the shapes. Who do we share this space with? The birds, the leaves, buildings, the concrete? Where are the spaces? Where are the gaps? And where are the bits that are completely filled up? So Alfie's just on my foot now. Have loads of fun doing this, and you can have just as much fun sat looking out your window if that's what you need to do, because you'll be surprised what starts to appear when you really start looking at a familiar environment in a different way. I hope so anyway. Okay, I will see you in the next part for a best practice quote from a famous poet and for our final activity for February. See you soon. Okay, well done for making it this far. You are in the final straight of the February workshop. And as promised, here is a best practice quote. These are basically just normal quotes, but they're about poetry, so that's hence the name. One of my secret instructions to myself as a poet is, whatever you do, don't be boring. And that's from Anne Sexton, and I think that's a fabulous quote. So it probably applies to life really generally. Most of these do, as well as poetry. Anne Sexton was born and raised in Massachusetts in America, one of the most popular poets of the mid-20th century. She was known for her highly personal confessional verse. She won the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry in 1967 for her book Live or Die. So you can look her up if you want to find out some more about her, but that's her quote. One of my secret instructions to myself as a poet is, whatever you do, don't be boring. Okay, talking of not being boring, this is definitely not a boring activity. So, one online craze that I've enjoyed recently is chocolate bar poems. So these are on the internet. You can see hopefully an example on the screen. Chocolate bar poems. People send a poem to another person and they use the chocolate bars as words in the poem. So here's one example that I really liked, and it shows how playing with words can be fun and that not everything we write needs to get published. We can just have fun. We are creative beings. We are all artists. We're not all professional artists, but we're all artists. So I'll have a read of it for those who like it being read. Dad, your skin may be flaking and your bones may be breaking, but don't worry. I've got a few tricks up my sleeve to have you looking like the marvellous creation you once were. I've even got a trick to have you twirling and rapping like M&Ms in the car on the way to football. If I travelled the Milky Way or even to Mars, I would never be able to find a better dad. You make me feel all bubbly inside. With you, life's a picnic. Have a good Father's Day. I hope you have a few Snickers reading this card. Have fun eating it. So that was one that somebody sent to their dad and went online and it was very big. And we're going to say it's I guess it's like something, it's a card, isn't it? It's like a Father's Day card. But it's, as we all know, because we've had cards, most of us, they have poems in them and people are paid to write those poems. And sometimes it's fun to write your own poem in the card. So this is not something that's going to get you published. Please don't send it might help if you send chocolate bars to the publishers, but this one is more for fun. If you wanted to, use real chocolate bars and send them to somebody to cheer them up. Alternatively, here's the suggested activity. I haven't got a bio for Charlie, who sent this Father's Day card, but I believe Charlie is from Australia. I don't know, male or female, I don't know who Charlie is or how old, but I just thought that was a fun example of a poem. So, can you create a poem out of wrappers or another recycled material? You could use newspaper cuttings or magazine cuttings or wrappers. Don't worry if you don't have wrappers, you can feel free to use something else, or to just write the words in of like chocolate bars or something similar if you want to do that instead. So you don't have to stick them to the paper, although it is a good excuse to buy lots of chocolate, so I'll leave that one with you. Basically, have fun creating a poem out of these recycled materials. If you're artistic, as in, like, you know, if you're very creative, I've just said we're all artists, so I'm being careful what I'm saying here now. If you enjoy being like very physically artistic, then you can, you know, make this into a collage. But if you just want to write a poem, then that is absolutely fine too. The important bit is play with words, have fun, keep smiling, and stay safe. And I'll see you in March.